ended up in an institution, not because of them, but something slipped up. You can't say depression is caused by, because you can win an Oscar and still have an episode. So I went on all these journeys, and it was somebody pointed out on May 11th, I checked into a clinic, and on May 11th this year, my book came out. And I thought, there's the miracle of medication. So I went in on May 11th. I became ill. I didn't have depression for 12 years. I kept that one at bay, but we never know when it's going to hit. It's like a beast in the night that comes and takes you hostage. So I ended up in the clinic. Without being facetious, it is a better book to write from a mental clinic about the journeys you had where you were looking for meaning. Meanwhile, I found out I wasn't running toward anything. I was running away from something, because what's explored in the mental institution, where I had to have a therapist, and she opened up what was underneath the rotten floorboards, is the reason why I was running so hard. So there's sort of two stories.
Does there always have to be a reason for depression?
No, there is no reason. We don't know. I know. Look, if somebody said, I don't know if this is true. All right, but if Bill Gates had given as much money to his causes that he did to mental health, we'd have a cure for depression. But that's not my business. But so little money has been thrown at the mothership, and almost every disease is caused by the mind. It sends out the cortisol, and it works like a pinball machine all the way down to the adrenal glands, and then gushes. It covers you, and this is responsible for physical diseases. Certain diabetes too, certain cancers. Obesity, infertility, premature aging, addiction. It keeps going on. So why money wasn't thrown at, as I call it, the mothership, I just don't know. People think, and especially mental health, it's such a lightweight word, that we have a thought bubble, and it's sort of gone awry this week, and people smirk slightly when they say mental. And
it's almost actually become a word which has been cancelled, isn't it? I mean, you can use it with mental health, but if you describe somebody as mental, then sort of that's not a term that you're supposed to use nowadays.
What are you supposed to say?
Well, I don't know.
Well, that whatever is skewed is not a good word either.
But do you feel that there's a lot of rhetoric around mental health, but not enough action? I mean, that's what you were kind of hinting at there, that it has been something that politicians of all parties have latched onto as an important subject. They've made speeches on their own mental health in the House of Commons, which would have been impossible even 10 years ago, I think. But is there enough action there?
Oh, are we leaving my book? Are we leaving the shores of my book?
We will be returning to it.
Oh, I like this. We're really drifting along.
Anybody that listens to this programme knows that I plug books remorselessly, so you have no fear on that.
Stick with the subject, Ruby, because you start on one and then you jump to another and nobody actually followed you. But you are going down the Nile, and then suddenly we're doing the backstroke in a pool. Well, that's another thing I'm here to talk about besides my book, is that we can't really depend on the government because everybody talks about it, gets all excited, and then suddenly somebody's hit by a bus. We don't have an attention span anymore. So I remember a few years ago, Norman Lamb was, getting us all riled up that we were going to suddenly get millions from the government, and we didn't see it because I don't need to tell you.
He beat me in the 2005 general election.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did that hit a trigger for you?
Yeah, I'm a bit depressed now.
I can see that. So I'll take over the show.
Funny, I thought you already had.
No, okay. No, I'm leaving gaps for you to take me off piece.
Anyway, going back to the government. What would you like them to do?
I don't want the government to do anything. They don't do a lot, whatever they do. But you're talking about people who, I wouldn't say, appearance-wise, are the most human. I don't trust anybody if I can't see the flaw, and that's the very job where you don't show it at all costs. So, recently we picked people who cause fear. I'm not talking about my ex-president, but he was so terrifying that people went to him to save them from the very man who's causing them the terror. It's like I saw once on a train, a child was being beaten by its mother, and then it went to its mother for solace. And I think in a way that's our relationship with some of our presidents. Well, one in particular, is that he's causing the fear, and then we think he can solve it. So we're very confused as to who we're giving jobs as leaders. Are they the most angry? And so let's depend on businesses, because something like Unilever makes, I don't know how many more times than the government has, and they don't need to be voted in every few years. So we have to depend on the kindness of strangers, and that's something else I was supposed to talk about, because it's Mental Health Week again. Isn't that it's every day is Mental Health Day. I mean, for God's sake.
Well, for many
once
people
a week,
it is.
Yeah. So we talk about it this week. We'll forget about it when it's let's grow a mustache on a mothball. People are really not focused, because this is the most disastrous of them all, especially after the pandemic. Mental health is the crisis of crises. What I'm here for is the Big Give, is a charity that this week and other weeks, but this week especially, if you donate money, if you give to this, there's 180 charities, but to me the most important one is Frazzle Cafe, which is mine, then funders will match it. So if you put in 50, we'll get 100. So this is a new phenomenon.
And how do people donate?
You go to biggive.org, and then you donate.
I was so worried there that you wouldn't know.
Oh, no, I know my stuff. I don't know what you know.
Very little.
Anyway, that's what's going on this week. So one of the charities is Frazzle Cafe.
We've plugged that. We've plugged your book.
What else do we have?
We have 45 minutes now to plug a lot more, but we're going to take some calls soon as well.
Have we made sense?
Hear a lot more from Ruby Wax. 0345 6060 973. It's 9:15.
This is LBC.
Paramount.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Tweet at LBC.
17 minutes past 9 on LBC. Remember we were talking about when and if you should use the word mental. Well, apparently Ofcom does not consider calling something mental offensive, such as that's just mental, but does for describing a person, which I suppose is quite reasonable, isn't it? We're with Ruby Wax. She's about to take some of your calls.
I would find it quite flattering.
Would you? Why?
Well, no, because I can make fun of my people. You can't. But if you were of my tribe, we would call each other derogatory things.
So it's a similar...
You have to be one
I
to
can
laugh
use the
at
word
one.
queer as a gay man, but you can't.
Yeah, exactly. I can laugh at you, you can't.
This is very true.
Yeah.
One other thing I think that a lot of people think, well, how can somebody who has had a very successful career, is very extrovert, how can they be depressed? I mean, that's
you see, this
the sort of
is such
thing
a
that comes
terrible...
up so much, isn't it?
It's so boring, because depressed is an unfortunate word. In any other language, it doesn't translate as sad or having a bad hair day. Alzheimer's fine, because we don't quite know what Alzheimer's means. But depression is just another brain disease. And you wouldn't say to somebody with Alzheimer's, oh, come on, get with it. Where's the car? So why with somebody with depression, an unfortunate word, do you think they can snap out of it? That you can say, perk up. The person has a disease. It's not sad. Ask any one of us what it feels like. And I have people in my audience, in my shows over the years, in the second half they speak. I'm just jumping ahead. There's people I've sometimes raise their hands, they have cancer and depression. I've always said, which is worse? It's always the depression.
Really?
I mean, yes, of course it is, because, well, I'm not saying with cancer you get sympathy, and God, nobody will fire you from your job. With depression, you're suffering alone. Nobody quite understands, and they use that hideous word, perk up. Also, I don't know why there's still a stigma about it. We've proven,
particularly when 1 in 4 people at some point in their lives.
If it's not you, it's your grandmother or your cousin or your workmate.
But do you feel that people are more open about it now? That they, even in the workplace, where I think that is a particular stigma, where people imagine that if they talk about it, they'll just be treated as a second-class employee, and that the employer will be looking for an excuse to get rid of them.
That it's a weakness, that they can pull themselves out. Well, things are changing slowly. I mean, I don't know where the law is right now, but there was a law you couldn't fire somebody with a physical disability. Let's hope there is parity now with mental distress. And what we were talking about before, mental and physical, is the same thing. There's a onesie here. So, as I said, mental can cause physical illness. Physical cause mental. When did we start to separate? And at the neck, it all ends, and then it begins again. Everything is fueling everything. My reaction to you is physical. My body is switching on different hormones as we speak. Yeah, well, yours is too. We work like neural Wi-Fi. We affect each other.
I think we better go to the calls, Ruby.
Okay.
Before we say something we might regret.
Okay.
Let's go to Rupert in Lancaster. Rupert, hello, what would you like to say?
Hello, Ruby.
Hello, Rupert.
I'm totally jacked being able to speak to you, because you're the first superstar I've ever spoken to.
Oh.
Hang on, you've spoken to me
cousin.
before.
Yeah, I guess. This is going to give him such low self-esteem, I'm going to have to peel him off the floor.
Go on,
Listen,
Rupert.
Ruby, right? Is it good to put labels on people like bipolar, ADHD, clinically depressed, schizophrenic, or should we move past that and just accept people for what they are?
Well, if you didn't have medication for bipolar and schizophrenic, it would be mayhem. So, we have a diagnosis. It's not, we're still in the foothills of medical science. But you have to, once you have a real mental illness, I'm from the school of you've got to have medication. Now, the problem is so many GPs now throw generic pills at you, which aren't necessarily good for your health. If you haven't got depression, don't take the antidepressives. So we're at the mercy of giving you a category. Otherwise, how would you treat the flu? How would you treat COVID? How would you treat... Mental health is exactly the same. You need to know where to start. You don't give somebody chemo if they don't have cancer.
But in terms of getting diagnosed, that's not very easy, is it? I remember doing a phone-in a few months ago on ADHD.
I think a schizophrenic is pretty obvious, and so is a bipolar.
ADHD, well, it may be obvious. Well, it's not, though, is it? Because you have a lot of 40 or 50-year-olds being diagnosed with ADHD now. It puts the final piece in the jigsaw for them.
Yeah.
They hadn't realised it until someone actually said to them, that's what you've got.
Right. Well, I'm not an expert in ADHD. That's not what I studied, so I'm not going to... I'm not going to say anything. But there's no question when somebody's bipolar, don't futz around. This person is going to set their hair on fire. It's not going to go away by wishful thinking or a positive group chanting about, crystals. They need medication. ADHD isn't my area. So bring on an expert. I'm the wrong gal tonight.
Okay, let's move on to Claire, who's a first-time caller, is calling from Huddersfield. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Hi.
What would you like to say?
I have a friend who is currently in a mental health unit. She's suffered for a couple of years, tried to take her own life many times, and I just want to know, as a friend, is there anything you can recommend that I can do for her, support her, other than just going and seeing her?
Well, just go and see her, and never doubt that she has something that's a reality for her. It's not your place to question it. And, with a family or whatever, ask them, don't try to pull them out of it, or don't even try to help. There's so much shame connected to these illnesses that sometimes you might exasperate it. So really, try to say what's not right with your life. If somebody says fine all the time, it breaks my heart, especially if I'm feeling terrible. Just give me your vulnerability, and then you can just love them. But be honest, accept them, and say, how is it today? Because one thing, those of us who are the walking, that's the thing about depression. It's not sadness. It's a death. Your eyes are dead. That's how you can tell if somebody has got depression. Look in their eyes. That's for teachers too. But just, if they want help, help them. If they don't, move away, but just love them.
And Claire, in your experience, have you found it awkward with your friend when you see them?
No, not at all. No, we chat. She asks me how I'm doing. She tells me what's been happening in the place where she is, and we kind of laugh a bit.
Well, that's
she
all
can
you
see
can
the funny
do.
side of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to help. I want to make her better, but I know I can't.
But that's a great thing, isn't it? Because what you're doing is reintroducing some normality into her life with those kind of conversations.
Yeah. Good. I'm doing the right thing then.
And if you can make somebody laugh, which you know all about, Ruby, that is a really big step. I remember once I had somebody who I knew vaguely but not very well ring me up at midnight on a Saturday, and I assumed it was a pocket call, but I took it in the end, and it was somebody who said they were about to take their own life.
What did you do?
I talked to him for 45 minutes and eventually made him laugh. And as soon as I made him laugh, I thought, you're not going to do it now.
Wow.
And he didn't. And that's happened, same person has done this 3 times. And I kind of know what to do. I've had no training in it whatsoever. But it's, when you think what the result could be.
What a responsibility.
Well, it is.
Do you remember what you said that made him laugh?
No.
Oh, no, I bet you
I think
can.
it was probably some double entendre or something like that. That's what I'm best at.
So 3 times you made him laugh?
Yeah. Well, 3, no, he's called on at least 3 separate occasions where he's felt in a really low place. And for some reason, he has a list of 10 people. And apparently people are advised if they're feeling suicidal, they should have a list of 10 people.
That they can call.
And they start with number 1. Go to number 2. I was number 10, which made me feel so special, as you can imagine.
The ego's still, even in that circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. But I kept thinking,
disgusting.
what if I hadn't picked up?
What if you hadn't picked up? Yeah.
And you, even...
Do you know, have you seen the guy? Do you see him in real life? Does he...
We talk occasionally. I think I've only met him once.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
How did you get on the list?
I don't know. I think because he listens to this programme and he knows...
Wow.
He knows that I've dealt with this. I have had people ring in this programme and be on the verge of suicide. And I know during COVID, and I'm not saying this to sort of... there are 3 people alive in this world today that would not be alive had we not done that mental health phone-in during COVID. And I know that because they've told me.
That's incredible.
And that's why it's been so much to me, even though I've never suffered from depression in my life, but it fascinates me.
But you know how to talk. You know how to connect.
That's kind of my job, isn't it, I suppose?
No, but a lot of people would have it, especially this time. They talk at you and they do that kind of DJ voice. The fact that you're responsive.
But do you not think that writing this book plays a sort of similar role, where you're talking to people who have gone through maybe some similar experiences to you? They may think of you as this celebrity that they've sort of seen.
I don't think anymore.
No, I think well,
maybe.
I think
that's
a lot of people do, but they can see that you've gone through what they are going through, and that is a tremendous thing.
No, I do feel that, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. I always get that. No, but, I'll do a mental take it off and say what it is. And because I'm kind of good with words and I don't whine, I use that language to make you laugh, and then I'll take you down again and up. And I think when I go for reality, I sort of think I deserved it because I made you laugh for a minute, and now let's speak the truth. And I think people feel she's hit the truth, and that's me too. And that's sort of why I write it, because I like meeting them in the street, and they go, yeah, I feel, that's why I love Frazzle Cafe and I run it, is I am with my people. Just speak from the heart. Don't give me your job description. Don't give me, I can see that on social media, which I can't look at, because it stokes your envy, and that gets us sicker than anything, is when we feel this, I'm not good enough. And this whole culture, is about making money by making you feel I'm not good enough.
Can you be totally honest, though, when you're writing a book, when you're doing interviews? Is there any inhibition
If you asked
there?
me to be, I would be, sure. I mean, why? If I felt somebody was laughing at me, or they were wondering why, or it wasn't appropriate, some people are now using their illness to make money, or to get on stage and go, "Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my mother tried," whatever. I if you're honest, they smell it. Again, that's neural Wi-Fi, and then you can see in their eyes. They go, "Oh yeah, you're like me." I love that. It's lonely enough as it is. I really want to meet people who feel as deep.
We have to go to a break in a minute. We'll come to some more calls, but I also want to ask you about the effect on people's friends and families. I mean, we heard there from Claire, who's obviously really worried about her friend. How have your family and your husband coped with your depression and the difficulties that must flow from that?
Well, he comes from a military background,
Stiff upper lip.
Loved being in the trenches, marvellous, having a cups of tea and lovely scones and the doodle bombs bombing away. So I knew
don't think
that.
I've ever heard you do a British accent.
Oh, I'm very good at it. I have friends in certain neighbourhoods. He came from a tough background, and when we were getting married, I've said this before, when we were going down the aisle, I told him, how old I really was.
You'd lied about your age.
Totally. I mean, by 10 years. And he looked at me because I knew we had to fill the thing out. And I'd been married twice before. I never told him that. And 3, I was mentally ill. And the guy still made it to the registrar.
You literally said that as you were going down the aisle?
Yep. I thought, wait for the last minute, Rube, so he can't bolt. So he can take it. And when I get ill, this guy doesn't abandon me. And now he knows what's the look in my eye. And he starts to warn me and say, Ruby, you're going. And I think that's real love, is when you can say to a kid or whatever, to go, I know you, and things on your face are starting to change. Because those of us with illness, we can't, if a brain has gone down, can't make an assessment. It's ill in itself. You can see I have a broken leg, but a sick mind, you haven't got a spare to make an assessment.
Do you have a broken leg?
Well, I'd know that before you did. But if I was very, very ill, it would be nice if you turned to me and went, Ruby, get off the show.
The reason that I asked the question is because I think it must be almost as tough on somebody's partner. And
it is.
And I don't know if you've read Alistair Campbell's diaries.
Can we not mention Alistair Campbell when I have a book out?
Well, he's got one out as well.
I know.
He's coming in on Thursday too.
Right, but
that's about politics.
Okay.
But the reason that I mentioned him is because his partner, Fiona, I mean, she has gone through a living hell with him. He would say it himself. And to stay with somebody I know you've been married for a long time, and he's been with his partner, Fiona, for decades. How often do you think about the effect that it has on your husband?
I think he suffers, and I'm sure my kids are. But he has that stiff upper lip. I don't see it. My kids also have learned that, to go, oh, mommy's not well again. And they know when I'm coming back. And they've seen me in clinics. So, but they're not frightened of it because the people around me are I think we are the master race. Somebody with a mental problem is sometimes the most interesting person on the block. But they also know there's medication. This comes and goes. We're not... The stigma, we haven't got it all the time. So Ed sometimes treats me very gently when I'm perfectly normal. So I have a lot of power over him, because suddenly if he does something wrong, I could slit his throat. So I keep him on his toes. But they do, I'm sure they suffer. But, they're good at hiding it, as some... But they know that. But
when he says
really
he can,
not right.
Actually, I'll ask this question after the break because we're a bit late. I was so engrossed with your conversation, so I'm late for the news. You're making me do a bad job, Ruby.
Oh no, go for it.
It's 9:33. News headlines on LBC with Tim Daly.
Russia is criticising the UK's decision to give more missiles and drones to Ukraine, saying it takes a negative view of the move. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been meeting the Prime Minister as part of his short tour of Europe. The competition watchdog has found supermarkets have increased the margins they make on fuel, meaning drivers are paying more than they should be. The CMA's also launched an investigation to see if the same thing is happening with food prices. And Microsoft's takeover of the computer game company Activision, which makes Call of Duty, has been approved by the EU. British regulators have already blocked the move. LBC weather: dry overnight with clear skies, but thicker cloud and scattered showers will move in across northwestern Scotland. We'll have an overnight low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC. Iain Dale on LBC.
9:37 on LBC. Ruby Bax is with us. Her book.
Wax.
What did I say?
Bax. It's
I
okay.
didn't.
I swear
Didn't
you did. Okay, we can cut it out. Edit it.
No, it's live.
Okay.
I'm not as well as I thought I was, is her book. If you're watching on Global Player, that's the cover. And it's... I was just about to ask you before we went to the news there, about... You said that your husband kind of can detect when an episode is coming.
Yeah.
Is it even right to say episode? I don't know.
Yeah, you can say episode.
That's coming on. How does that manifest itself with you?
Well, he's right now. You know, in the beginning, as I said, I do mindfulness, and the reason I do it is because I can tell when it's coming myself.
Right.
As I said, you can't notice it, but mindfulness, it's almost like you're used to taking your temperature inside of the conditions. Instead of a barometer outside, I can tell when it's starting to, it's like an animal sensing an earthquake. So I can start to tell when it raises its head. But sometimes it used to overwhelm me, and it takes you hostage overnight, you know, that like a little demon is eating away at your brain.
And can you physically function?
No,
that?
I can function.
Or could you come and do this here?
No, nobody can. Right. I mean, if you
Alistair
can.
did. I remember he came in one day to
and what was
the
he
previous
like?
book, and I knew there was something wrong. And then he wrote about it in his next volume of diaries, and how difficult. He said, I couldn't not do it. And I thought, well, actually, you could, you know. It's not the worst
No, but
thing.
he has the same fear of being caught, too, even though he says it. I had once picked me up I was in a mental clinic, I can say mental, and I was doing a program about depression, and he picked me up, I put my pajamas up. I had my pajamas, I put my coat over it, and all the other patients said, God, is this brave? that's a good review coming from them. Or they said it's crazy. Actually, it was what they said. I went home and there was a person with depression and I interviewed her and she was looking at me going, "You're crazier than I am." And the crew couldn't tell. I was too ashamed to cancel a show about depression, not admitting that I had it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's wild. There's such shame it's attached to it because you think, come on, I can pull myself out of it. Thoughts are just thoughts.
Now, you've got a couple of texts, though, which you're going to read out because
Yes.
my eyes won't allow me to
I
read
know,
them out
God bless
at the
you.
moment.
Okay. Yeah, gradually I'm taking over the
Yeah.
job. And then he can't sit up anymore, and then you'll just see me here.
This is Ruby Wax on LBC.
Well, I'll shave the head. Think a big problem is that we're... Which one did I want to do? Think a big problem is that we're not taught how to deal with stress or how to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy stress. So many people end up with chronic stress or burnout or breakdown or addiction. We need much better access to talking therapies too. I mean, I did write a book called Frazzled, which is a neurobiological word meaning stress about stress, and that's our disease these days. In the past, nobody died of stress. You know, they died of old age at about 12 and a half, but they didn't die of stress. And what's happening now is the cortisol, there's too much of a buildup because we never de-wire. You know, in the old days, if a predator attacked you, eventually, you know, you could take him on or get out of town. But if you were still in existence, and you'd know because you were either lunch or having lunch, the cortisol would come down and you'd go back to the day job. Now, we're never cool. So most of us, if you're in this culture, if you are in a high state of stress, at the news, I know you work on it, but come on, give us a break. We don't need so many close-ups.
Yeah.
You don't need that music, because already I'm scared. And the producers know how to get us anxious because then we'll watch even more news thinking, well, where else is the next accident? Advertisers know how to make you drool to be happy. And whatever you are isn't good enough till you buy. We're being manipulated by geniuses. So if you aren't stressed, I think, you know, if you aren't stressed, something's very wrong with you.
Right, let's go to some more calls.
So let me just say, the difference between stress and chronic stress is very different than being mentally ill. So we have to make that distinction. You can be as stressed as you want or not as stressed as you dream of. You will, if you have depression, you still have it. It's got nothing to do with stress. It's like being pregnant or not pregnant. So let's make that distinction.
Okay. Chris is in Prestwick in Scotland. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Ruby. Thanks for doing this. Hi there. I've got an observation to make about how we as a society handle mental health. And I think whilst mental health is stigmatised, the word trauma doesn't get used an awful lot, like an adverse childhood experience or something terrible that happens, death of a sibling, etc. And I think the two are intrinsically linked and could be part of a majority of sufferers of mental health issues. So I'm just wondering what we could do as a society to introduce the traumatic element of mental health into conversation.
Well, it's funny because the book I just wrote is about trauma. I did think trauma was something that Oprah would use quite a lot, or that you had to be in a war. But certainly with certain, I'm lucky, is that I had EMDR therapies, which deal with trauma. And trauma is... I mean, if you dig below the surface, I did not know that I was locked in as a child. She had to uncover that trauma.
What does EMDR mean?
EM is eye movement desensitization, reprocessing. Forget about the word, but what it does is it was explained, I didn't think I was traumatized. I thought I'm just mentally ill. So he's completely right. Trauma is a mental illness, and we better take it really seriously. That I understand, PTSD, ADHD, in some letters I understand. But EMDR, I was lucky enough to have a therapist, which is those of us with trauma, he'll know, we're frozen in a certain time. You know, you're stuck in that memory because you're just emotional. It's just fight and flight. And so certain therapies can connect you to a part of the brain that thinks more rationally and is more verbal. So once you can understand what happened clearly and rationally, then you can deal with it. But PTSD or trauma means you're locked. Something so horrific happened that it's put in a filing cabinet and and put on ice. You'll never see it again, but you still act out. That's why a lot of kids who were abused, they don't know what happened, but later on they'll find some abuser and get back at them. So it should be taken really seriously. And that pandemic is traumatic. So I see, why COVID could cause trauma.
I think it's fascinating that because of what you'd gone through, well, I assume it's because of what you'd gone through, you wanted to study the brain and get to understand it in a way that most of us would never even think about. And you effectively went back to school. You studied it. You've got qualifications. You got an OBE for all your work in this area. What drove you to do that?
Well, exactly that. I grew up. My parents were, can I say, insane? Is that allowed? I mean, if I don't call it, who's going to? And it's so insane that it's funny. Carrie Fisher edited my first book with me, and she said, your parents are insane. Now you don't get a better review than that. But they were German, so it's funny with that accent. Mother murderer, she would call me lovingly. But what were we talking about? I got carried away with my parents.
Academic research.
What?
Why you got into studying the brain?
Well, because, and I was interested when I was a kid. I stole a book at 8 from the library, a book called This is Mental Illness, and I probably owe £20 million by now for that. I was fascinated.
At the age of 8?
I stole it from the library.
Wow.
Yeah. But then I found out when they did that show, Who Do You Think You Are?, that every generation from my mother was put in an insane asylum all the way back. So it's interesting that somehow I was fascinated with it. And I want to put the Rubik's Cube together. My parents convinced me it was my imagination, that I was locked in. They'd always say, hey, she's a kook, she's making it up. And so thanks to great therapy, I found out, no, you can't make that up. That's part of the horror of this mental illness, is you think, did I dream this? Is this just me? Am I being self-indulgent? Well, it is what it is. I mean, to find out that you were actually locked in, I knew something was wrong because I never saw night outside until I was 18 and rebelled and then jumped out of the window and went out for the night, every night, and then would be whipped senseless when I got back home. But that was my normal. So trauma is when somebody digs it up and you need professional help. And you go, oh, I see. I understand why I was looking for meaning. I was trying to get out of the house.
Girls on Top, according to a texter.
Good segue. Good segue.
It's a radio link, Ruby. Girls on Top, according to a texter here, was 1985 to 1986.
Thank you. I was 3.
I don't want to send you into a trauma.
No, that's traumatizing. My mother used to lie about her age. She was about 89, and I took her to a shrink because she was now paying the window cleaner $10,000 to clean the windows. She'd lost it. And I said, Mommy, this isn't about you. We're talking about Daddy here. And so he said, Mr. Wex, how old are you? And she said, smoking a pen, because she forgot she smoked cigarettes. That's how far gone. And she went, I may be off by a few years. 53. And he said, your mother's not an accurate historian, and wrote out a prescription for antidepressants. And about 6 weeks later, she was a charming individual. So go figure that. If they had given her antidepressants when I was growing up, I would be a housewife living in Evanston, Illinois, and you would be talking to no one.
Or Alistair Campbell. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Colin Brazier.
Net migration's on course to top 1 million this year. Suella Braverman says it's not xenophobic to worry about that, but is she right to say Britons are in danger of forgetting how to do some jobs?
Colin Brazier on LBC. Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
It's 9:51. Ruby Wax is here. Her book is called I'm Not As Well As I Thought I Was. Is that enough plugs? Can I get away with that?
Yeah, you're okay now.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm just saying, don't hold up Alistair's that often.
Oh, I'll try.
Just maybe like this.
Tune in at 8 o'clock on Thursday evening. So you can see for yourself. Right, Stephanie is in Bushy. Hello, Stephanie.
Hello, Ian. Hello, Ruby.
Hi.
Hi.
I have just got a quick question for you. So I wondered when the narrative started changing and when you decided so bravely to come out and start talking about this.
Well, I was outed by Comic Relief. Did you know that?
No, really?
Yeah, I never told anybody. And you're talking about Jennifer Saunders. She used to...
We were in the break, by the way.
We were talking about Jennifer. She used to come in while we were writing and said she knew something was wrong. She said this when I finally did my show, because I used to say something about getting out of the way of my dead grandmother. So she said she knew something was wrong, but she never questioned it until I started doing my shows about mental illness, and that she went, bingo, that's it. I said, you were the one who told me to perk up. Anyway, we're friends again. But Comic Relief, thank God. Comic Relief put a big poster of me outside every single tube station without asking me, that said on it, 1 in 4 people have mental illness. It's get worse. 1 in 5 people have dandruff. I have both. And I had a red nose on, and I saw that, and I almost had a heart attack. And it wasn't in one tube station. It was in every tube station.
How could they not ask you?
I think they thought it was, I don't know. And my career wasn't doing so well, and usually you can tell how well it's doing by the size of the poster. This was big. So I thought, this is really true, I thought I better write a show and pretend that's my publicity poster. You know, that I was opening in the West End, and it was called, it's not a good title, it's a little long. 1 in 4 people have mental illness, 1 in 5 have dandruff. Not as... a little bit longer than I'm not as well as I thought I would. Not far off.
That is an arresting book title. Yes. That would make me want to pick up the book if I was in a bookshop.
Well, all right.
I mean, if I'd never heard of you, I would still want to see what it was
Look at the book. Well, there you go. There's a plug.
There, you can put it on the back of the paperback edition if you like.
So anyway, what happened was I had to write a show, and but then I was too embarrassed to put the show on anywhere, so I did it in mental institutions for 2 years, where I'd perform on their buffet counter, or... they didn't have a stage, and I did it free, but I got to stay overnight because mental institutions are my happy place. I know that's strange, but they let me sit in the smoking room every night, and if you want conversation, the theater, forget about it. Sit in a smoking room in a mental institution, the finest lines in the world. I mean, one woman said, how do you get a poltergeist out of a Hoover? Another one, I love these people, they're mine. She said that too many foxes... had been coming into her house and stealing frozen prawns, so she put some vegan food outside her door, and that kept him away. And when you're in a mental institution, you'd never ask why. You just listen to those stories.
Stephanie?
I've got a communist living in my back molar. There's another one. Sorry, am I plugging mental institutions?
Stephanie, thank you very much for that. Let's go to Wayne in Boston. Hello, Wayne.
Sorry,
hi, Wayne.
I'm still laughing at that. Sorry. Ruby, Ian, how the devil are you?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to ask?
Ruby, I'm 62, and I spent, I would say, half my life in the limelight, pub entertainer, and the list goes on and on and on. But for the last 15 years, I've become a recluse. I've gone from one end to the scale to the other. Now, is this down to mental illness or is it old age?
How old are you?
62.
That's not old age. What happened? One day you just shut in?
I've been, like I say, pub entertainer, and I love being in the limelight. 9 years of age.
It happened in one night, or how long did it take?
That's it. It just shut down. I knew I had to go out and do a gig. I went, I managed, I put on a smiley face, but I sold all my PA equipment, and I've never been in the public house since. I don't go out in the public now. My only communications really in the world is through LBC radio. I just really have become a recluse, But
you see, Wayne, that's quite interesting. You describe yourself as a recluse, and yet you're quite happy to come and speak on national radio. There's something that doesn't quite compute there, isn't there?
yes, there's something wrong now. Am I still wanting the limelight, but then go out and do it?
And you're getting it through. You're going through Iain.
Sorry.
I'm happy to be your conduit. Mm-hmm. I think that is really interesting.
Really interesting.
Because I suspect that you're not... I mean, for people who would describe themselves as a recluse, I'm not sure that you quite fit the bill there.
No.
Are you sure it isn't agoraphobic?
Agoraphobic? I don't think so, because I can still say good morning to people on my dog walk, but...
Oh, so you do go out of the house?
I walk, yes, I do walk around my bungalow with my 3 dogs, but... Now, to put me in a public house situation or a restaurant, well, I'm having a cold sweat even thinking about doing that.
But that's a phobia. You know, I think you've developed a phobia. It's no, you know, if you want to go to a CBT, cognitive behavior therapist, they deal with that. But I wouldn't say mental illness. I'd just say sometimes you develop a phobia, and the more you believe it, the more it exasperates, and then you ruminate on it. So I think you're trying to break it by coming on the radio show.
Wow.
I think you have a yearning for it, but take it seriously. You've got a phobia.
Wayne, you are welcome anytime on my show.
Yeah.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, Ruby.
Oh, no.
You've always struck me... Well, we could go on for another hour, but Colin Brazier, who's on next, might not be very happy with that. You've always struck me as a fundamentally optimistic person. Do you feel that you are?
No, not at all. No, I totally the opposite. My book, I'm not as well as I thought I was. I get the ratings this week. I'm not optimistic, and I'm already upset.
So if you don't get into the Sunday Times top 10, you think you're a failure? Come
and visit me. You know where I'll be. Yes, I will think I'm a failure.
Really?
I'm very,
But you sold 1 million books. You can't be a failure. Not of that one, but of your previous ones.
Yeah, I know, but I have to prove it every time. I mean, as much as I study mindfulness and I get a degree and whatever, I'm still, I'm flawed. I'm deeply flawed, but I'm trying, and that makes me human.
Well, I know everyone's really enjoyed this hour. I think
have
it's been
they?
Absolute. Well, if anyone hasn't, just shut up. We don't want to hear from you.
Be honest. 1 to 10. Jennifer Saunders being 10.
Well, Jennifer Saunders was a brilliant interview that I did many years ago.
Just be honest, I can take it.
I think you are up there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was already picturing the sleeping pill I was going to take if I was 9.
No, you're way above 9.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to invite you back very, very soon.
Okay.
That's Ruby Wax. Her book, I know we've said it many times, it's called I'm Not As Well As I Thought I Was. Well, thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7 on Cross Question. We'll have the Labour MP, Belle Ribeiro Addy, and the editor-in-chief of the website, unheard.com, Freddie Sayers. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Clive Bull. But first, here's Colin Brazier.
Thanks, Iain. Later this month, we'll learn if net migration to Britain has smashed all previous records. 1 million is the figure being bandied around. Today, Suella Braverman said we need to try harder to fill jobs with British workers before turning to foreign labour. There was, she said, no reason why Brits shouldn't drive